Today, we will look at how do we be creative, and are there some secrets to being continuously creative and generate innovative ideas, all part of innovation. So when we say innovation, it's all also linked very closely with being very creative. And we look at, is creative some kind of a science, some kind of a entity, where is it something which is God given in some way, or is creativity uh, to be developed? And if yes, to be developed, what is the secret of this endless creativity? So let us deep dive and have a look at a glimpse of the techniques which are available. One of the techniques for creative being extremely creative. We will have a quick glance at it, a quick example, and that should help us really appreciate that and give us a lot of solace and confidence that yes, creativity can be created. Creativity is inherent to all of us, and it can be developed at any moment of time. So let me share a deck with you, and we look at how do we be creative on a continuous fashion. And when you look at endless creativity, one of the techniques we are looking at today, and there are multiple others, what we are looking at today is a science called as inventive thinking methods and techniques. And we look at what are those. So essentially, it looks at how do we be creative whenever we are trying to find innovative solutions to challenges where we see the overall challenges as a set of contradictions and conflicts. And let me explain as we go ahead on how this is done. So my name is David Isaac, and I'm a design thinker, innovation practitioner, certified and it is level 3 practitioner. This deck also comes along with you from my co-founder Ishpal, also from Iris Innovate, and we focus on creating this capability for generating a lot of creative ideas and innovations for organizations and building that capability for them. So we begin with the basic question: when we say creativity, what is it exactly, right? And what do we mean by creativity? And as we look at this, is it when we say creativity, suddenly it comes, creativity in cinema, creativity, is it something got to do with art? Is it something got to do with science, literature? Are people creative when they write, different types of literature, stories and others, storytelling? Is it creativity in music? So of course, yes. So creativity element per se are in all of these different sciences or different areas where human being expresses themselves. So anything where a human expresses the vision, a certain feeling and emotion, and you are expressing and discovering something which is unknown, you always get into the zone of creativity. So creativity is inherent in a way. If you look at what is creativity, it simply is looking at, of course, it's complex, multifaceted. It's a cognitive process which involves generating of novel and valuable ideas and solutions or expressions in a way, which at that moment of time, nobody really thought about it, or nobody looked at it from that perspective. And as we look at that different perspective, we start getting to the zone of creativity. Of course, it includes these different sciences of art, science, literature, music, problem solving, where human being expresses creativity in particular. But essentially, we say when we are creative, we usually use the phrase thinking out of the box, and conventional boundaries or assumptions, our biases in terms of looking at things. Sometimes we challenge assumptions. Many people say that, for example, why should we be so in telecom, and that's what they're looking at, in terms of being very creative, is why should I have these towers and which emit a lot of radio waves which are harming the human being? So can I have microsatellites or drones which create networks in the sky, and that becomes something where I can directly connect and have mobility in that way? So suddenly you start getting creative because you start looking at things where nobody else has started to look at, right? And be very imaginative kind of solutions. So in this session particularly, we are looking at, and from a business perspective, and when we say business and when we look at our daily lives, I'm focusing today's session on being creative when we are doing problem solving. So from that perspective, we are trying to look at creativity. And if we are trying to solve a problem or a challenge or a business challenge or an individual challenge, can I be creative in coming up with solutions which are different in a way? So we are trying to explore that zone in particular. And so we have a framework. Of course, it's just a coincidence that you will see AI here at two locations. So AIG AI. So essentially, it's what we call as win over challenges. Nothing got to do with artificial intelligence as such. It's all got to do with human intelligence. A lot of focus on human intelligence here. Of course, many of the things can be automated, and strings can be generated on options using AI and other tools which are available for us at the moment. But a typical kind of a journey would involve some kind of analysis of the current challenge that you are facing, identifying contradictions or conflicts, which we will shortly see how they are identified. So, looking at challenges more like conflicts or contradictions, and then generating ideas using very simple principles, which we call as inventive principles, and generating ideas just not by just thinking about it, but you use certain guidelines or guide rails for you to think in a certain direction, and then assess the solutions and then deploy them in a way. So it's mainly a guided kind of a creative zone, if I may say so, that we can operate with. So let us take an example here, and we are just taking a situation so that we explore how to be creative when we are trying to solve the challenges. So imagine you are an employee in a huge corporation and have work experience of around 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, in that range. Income remaining constant. It's just beating the inflation in some way every year in terms of increments that you get, and you wish to increase your income by going on to higher positions. So you aspire for leadership position, and you want to have growth, professional growth, and so that's what you really look out for. Now, in that case, so one of the options is that you can actually look at pursuing an MBA or a master's degree. So you may want to upskill yourself and upgrade yourself academically and look at getting a higher position and thus higher income. So that's one direction that you feel you could do. But you see that there is also a con, there is a opposing kind of a force, which is saying that, yes, if you pursue your MBA master's degree, it requires time and money. So you need to invest a lot of your effort, time, money, resources uh, for you to even apply and complete the program. So now you see that there is some kind of a opposing force, and that is what we call as a contradiction. So a contradiction essentially, if you look at, is every time you're trying to solve a certain problem or a challenge and you try and aspire for doing something, in this case, is going at a higher income group and a higher position, is what you are aspiring for. And you have a path for you to follow, like going and getting upskilled or doing an MBA and a master's degree. You have an opposing force which constrains you in some form, right? So you always have something to gain and something to lose in a way. And this kind of situation remains everywhere. Every time you're trying to solve a challenge, this you will find that this kind of pattern exists. Because inherently, if this pattern did not exist, the challenge wasn't there. If there were enough resources, if there was enough manpower, if there was enough technology available, if there was enough time, if there was enough resources and money for us to spend, then the contradictions, there could be a different set of contradictions, but the contradictions that we are trying to solve may not be there in the right way. So problem may not exist also in a certain situation. And this kind of a structure where there are these opposing forces and there is a gain and there is a loss that is happening at two opposing sides is called as a contradiction, right? So in this kind of creative thinking, we start looking at challenges more like contradictions. and you try and figure this out. So essentially, what you have here is what's the contradiction? So you see, every action that you could take in a way has a positive and a negative effect, right? So you may go ahead, for example, I want to go to a higher position, I may aspire for an IJP and apply for that, and I may get the position, but then if I am not with the relevant skills, then I may not be able to perform. So you see, there's a positive negative impact that really comes in, right? So in our example here, you want to pursue your master's degree so you can increase your financial prospects, which is the positive effect, but you must put a lot of effort and time to acquire, which is the negative effect. So you have these positive negative forces which are typically acting here in our case, and that becomes the contradiction. So can you think about some examples like these where you see that the challenge itself is like a contradiction? You have certain path to follow, but then you have certain contradictions. Any thoughts? You may type in into your thoughts in the session, and in the on the community board, so you could look at this. Any examples that you feel are some kind of contradictions, examples of contradictions that you sense? We'll just give some couple of minutes for you to just experiment and think. Are there some contradictions that you see? Something which is plus and minus that is happening around you. Any thoughts? So as you pen in your thoughts on the community board, a few questions which are coming up here. So given the nature of virtual nature of work these days, how do you suggest teams maintain the creative spark in digital environment? How can teams effectively leverage inventive methods for creativity in a digital environment? Right. So I think this question is from Alia. Yeah. So it's a good one, because what you see is we are all operating in a digital space. So the onus of creativity essentially, you feel isolated because you are not in close connection or discussion with your colleagues in some form. So I think the best way for large teams to be very creative and in a digital environment is more got to do with collaboration, because digitalization helps lot of a lot of kind of collaborative environment where people can collaborate on certain challenges. You have open innovation that comes in, where you can post some of your challenges, others can help out, share some of their thoughts, get inspired. And of course, with a lot of generative AI and other pieces coming in, there are so many kind of triggers you can have from different spaces, for example. So if I say, I want to solve a particular challenge from, say, getting inspired from nature or getting inspired from technology, a particular field of technology. Digital technologies today are so very empowered that it can really help you out very beautifully. So I would say digital space per se, yes, it's a challenge, but it's a boon on the other side. It helps you collaborate seamlessly with your colleagues and friends in a way. And that kind of platform of collaboration, if we can develop, then it's really useful for us to work with, right? Right. So Nisha's question, sir, how do you personally tackle creative blocks when driving into complex business challenges? Any go-to tricks and habits that help you break through? So your question here is that, how do you tackle the creative blocks? So essentially the blocks, when you say creative blocks that you face, essentially come in from your biases. So it is very necessary that for anybody to be creative, you should expose yourself to divergent ideas, divergent thoughts, and that's increasingly difficult on social media also, because if you try and look at news of a particular view and a perspective, you get bombarded with the same ones over a period of time. So that's very, very difficult in today. So you will have to really consciously take an effort that you learn different sciences, different areas, literature, poetry, look at different, even in the workspace, even if you're working in, say, a software company, you need to know what happens in the mechanical world. And similarly, if you're in mechanical world and you need to know something that is happening in software, IT, it could be service industries, and that really exposes you to your own biases and solution designs that you may face. That really helps me overcome. I personally keep on looking at different sciences and expose myself to different perspectives. So it helps me overcome certain biases as I approach complex business problems. The business problems, when you perceive, you will be able to only do that when you have different views in a way, right? Yeah. So anything else that comes in? Yeah. So yeah. So when you look at contradictions, let me give an example of contradiction. So for example, I want to lead a very healthy life, right? And if I have to lead a healthy life and be fit, and others, what is one of the solutions that you have is you need to say, for example, do exercise, yoga, food, and other entities. But imagine a housewife is there and she wants to lead a healthy life and control her weight and health and other elements. You have a contradiction, because the contradiction is that the more time you spend on one side, if you spend higher time on exercising and personal care and other entity, you may lose time on your professional life. You may have to compensate on that. You may also lose focus on your own emotional and family life in large number of ways, and you may spend a lot of time doing other activities, and you may lose time focus on your children or your colleagues or your loved ones. So now you have a pressure of time. Where do you really allocate time? And so you have a contradiction. On the plus, you see, I can be fitter if I spend a lot of time on exercising and being fit and other entities, but it requires effort. It may involve a lot of cost, and how then I may lose focus on my professional life in large number of ways. Now, how do I balance both becomes the full question. And that, if we understand the challenge as a contradiction, then we are able to move ahead and start getting some very creative solutions. We don't go on lopsided in our actions in large number of ways. Say, for example, I do exercise for only 2 weeks, and then after there's a break of 4 weeks, and then I do the exercise again after 2 weeks, because now you don't have a solution design which is balanced in some form, right? So, any other examples that you have? Right. Any other examples that you see, contradictions that come to your mind? Yeah. So Rajesh, very interesting one. Rajesh here, choosing activities for a surprise day off by drawing them from a hat, even though you made the list yourself, right? So you may, have this kind of, so you create the list yourself, but then if you focus a lot of stuff on what you have, then you lose the art of being very impromptu in some way, right? So you will see that, yeah. So for someone like me looking to amp up their creative problem solving game, what daily rituals or habits should you be seeing work wonders in enhancing creativity? Some practical tips would be of great help, where you're trying to be creative in a way. So I'll show you some techniques here. So one is, as we go along, I'll show you the inventive thinking techniques on how to be creative, how to generate ideas. So first is to view, the point I'm trying to make here is, you just cannot become creative unless you change your perspective in the way you see things, right? And an artist, for example, uh, when they are sketching, and you look at the Rembrandt and you look at some of the artists, very famous artists, they are there. They see they see the environment and the surrounding in a certain light, in a certain perspective. And when they convey the perspective in a different form, that's when we say this is creative stuff. This is creative. We never imagined it would be like this. Or there's a different angle that we see. So when we are trying to solve the problem, it's always important that we bring in a new perspective. The new perspective that you're bringing is seeing challenges as contradictions. Now, when you see the challenges as the contradictions, I will slowly show you a technique here which will help you to generate creative ideas, right? So how do we go ahead? So let me just go ahead and share with you how do we now solve this contradiction that we are having. So the step number one is, you take a challenge, a business challenge or any other challenge, frame the contradiction. What's the plus minus? So I'm just graphically representing it like a contradiction here. So you see here, your objective is pursuing a master's degree. That's what you are looking at as an action. But it has a positive. There is a plus in the green box. You see there's something in the green box here. That's the potential higher salary. So that's the benefit that you would get, the plus. But what's the minus? The minus is a lot of time and money is getting spent. Right? So you will have to spend a lot of money. So we are framing this like a contradiction, like an if but, right? If but, I am framing an if but statement here. So I'm trying to look at the challenge differently before I start getting creative solutions. If I pursue a master's degree, then there is a potential that my salary would increase. Yeah. So if I do that, which is the green box, that's the plus. But I will spend a lot of money and time doing this. So I get something which is on the negative side, right? So you now are looking at changing a perspective of looking at challenges like a contradiction, like a set of plus minuses which operate in some form. And so how do I solve this problem, right? So if I am able to look at this problem as a plus minus, how do I really solve this problem? How do I really solve this problem creatively now? And for that, what we use is what is called as ideality. Also part of design thinking, also part of inventive thinking, also is what if. So we try and look at the ideal state that we would have. So ideal state, essentially what I have done, if you observe this, is I have the plus minus, the green and the orange box here, which is the minus. I just convert them into a positive statement. I change that, reverse it in some form, and I start seeing them as plus plus. So you say, okay, so what do I really want? I want to have a positive, a potential higher salary is what I would really love to have. And also I need to, the solution that I'm trying to get should also enable that I spend less time and money doing that. Now, if I am able to have potential higher salary through pursuing a degree, so I'm trying to go through a direction of pursuing a degree or qualification that I want to do that will help me attain higher potential. But simultaneously, it should also be, we are not compensating anything. It should also be less time and money spent, right? So what if? So we are framing the what if. What if there is a potential to earn higher salary and less time and money to spend while pursuing the master's degree? So now what you have framed now is you, step number one, you looked at the challenge like a contradiction. Step number two, you are framing it like an ideality, which is an ideal solution. I don't know exactly how I will reach there, but I know that that's the final state I want to reach, which is do a degree, earn higher, yet spend less and less time and less money than I should be doing, right? And that's what I want to really look at. Now, that's ideally. So you get the final end state. So like, Stephen Covey mentioned, start with the end in mind. So you have the end in mind with you in a way. So that's what I want to reach. And for you to be creatively generating ideas as you go through, we will look at how the inventive principles are used. So these inventive principles, essentially, as I mentioned earlier, we will look at two inventive principles. They provoke your mind to think in a certain direction rather than just thinking and ideating. It's just brainstorming. No, we just focus on a certain direction and try and build it up. So we try and figure out, and there's simple examples, and as we articulate, just two of the inventive principles we will look at with an example. Right. So in this, the first principle that we are looking at, inventive principle, is segmentation. So anything that you have, you segment it and you get a design. So if you look at the picture here, you will see that there is this cake and bakery, which is savory, which is there. And as the person is cutting it and dissecting it in some form, you are seeing it, you see a pattern, you see this pattern. So it's segmentation, dissecting it into smaller entities or smaller parts, which could be aligned. And you will see that this kind of principle is used very aggressively when people be very creative and generate very practical solutions also. Right. So creativity does not mean that we are out of the world. Creativity means that we are also practical in a way. So when you say creative, so you say dividing a business into smaller units. So when we have a large business, what they typically do is they create SBUs, smaller business units which focus on certain area. And maybe one business unit will supply to the other business unit, but in an entity, they are profit units by itself, right? So it helps me to manage a huge complex structure using small entities. You look at Reliance. Reliance has large, so many small organizations and companies which supply to each other in some form. They are huge. It's a complex structure that they created. Then the whole entity, the logic is divide a large business into smaller entities as it operates, and then let everything work with an efficiency, and that really helps you out, right? So you can have a business which offers selectable components. I can select certain entities and plug and play and customize them. Market segmentation is an example of how segmentation is done, so that you segment your markets on the demand, and therefore you can customize your products and services to meet that specific demand. And that's what many of the startups also do. Startups typically, when they are creative and addressing, they address a certain very specific niche area of the segment on what is really happening. You look at pet care, which is one of the largest segments growing today. Yeah, you will see in pet care, you have pet food, you have pet keeping, hygiene elements which come in. Then you have, the various accessories which are used for pets in large number of ways, and organizations which focus on very segmented kind of elements and taking care of pets when you are away on a holiday and others becomes a very huge market. How do you really manage that? So you segment it in some way, breaking a project into smaller segments for better control. We create a work breakdown structure. We create small milestones for us to reach. So we are able to move through. So that's how people have been solving many of the complex challenges using segmentation. So if we now take segmentation, so divide an entity into smaller units, and my whole objective is this, that I want to pursue a master's degree so that I get higher potential. So what if there is potential to earn a higher salary and less time and money is spent while pursuing the master's degree? If I have to attain that, and I use segmentation, I'm trying to use segmentation. What solutions come to your mind? Okay, what are the things that you can really think of as this comes to your mind? Any thoughts, anything that come to your mind using the principle of segmentation? You aren't thinking just abruptly, but if I have to help my colleague, my friend who is trying to get into higher salary, wants to pursue a master's degree, but the less time and money needs to be spent, how do we really walk through this? By segmentation, the principle of dividing certain pieces. So put your thoughts on the community, and we'll just see, any ideas that really emerge. It's more of an experimentation, right? So we are trying to think in a different direction so that we be creative when we come to our ideas. Any ideas when you try and use segmentation to build on work on this particular solution of yours? Any ideas? Yeah, so you can use segmentation beautifully in this. So I can segment, for example, master's degree that I would like to have. I may not go in for an MBA, which is a huge kind of entity. I may have a very specific kind of pieces that I may want to really address. I may look at a master's degree in a very specific segment where I see growth. So, for example, you are seeing growth in, say, agile technologies and other. You may follow a master's degree which looks at agile methodology in particular, and that helps you to go to the higher level. You are focusing, say, on example, you are focusing on finance, and just not finance, but there is a segment within finance which is of interest because you know that's value adding into your own work life and that's meaningful for you. So I can segment. So rather than just going for an MMS finance or a MBA finance or the whole finance entity which may take me 3 years, I may do an 8 months master's program or 10 months master's program that may help me. I segment that off in a way, right? I can even segment the topics, the subjects which come in, and I can say that okay, I may try and expose myself to programs wherein it rather than it's an accelerated program. which has very specific topics, and I can have certificates as I cover each topic, right? And as I cover each subject, for example, in finance, I may do budgeting, and that may help me directly in taking up job roles which help me do better budgeting. And therefore, I am now segmenting not the entire program by itself, but by the subjects. And that's how I would pursue. It will help you reduce your cost and effort that you do, the timeline that you would do. I segment it off, right? Anything else that comes to your mind? I may segment, rather than a full-time program that takes me off my job in some way. I may segment my time by doing a part-time. There's IGNU, there are distance learning, there are online learning modules which offers master's program. There are free multiple sessions which even help me do that, and even issue certificates which I may really go and check. So I am using segmentation. I am segmenting the program itself into different entities that helps me go faster in large number of ways, right? So you could anything else that comes to your mind? Segmentation. How do we really segment? Yeah. So you may segment the program. You may segment the duration. You may segment, how you really approach your master's degree. You may segment the money spent also, because then you may segment and something that you sponsor yourself, something that the company may want to sponsor. You may look at programs because a lot of organizations sponsor bits of small programs. So I may segment it into program and ask for some kind of resources from the organization that helps me do that, and that would help me reduce my cost. So I segment the cost. I segment my resources that I require, and that's very useful for people to work with. Right? Excellent. Right? The other principle, so I showed you principle number one, which is segmentation. The other principle, and this is the last principle that we are taking for today, and of course there are so many. We just picked up two. There are in fact 40 such principles, and you could use different ones at different times and different types of challenges for you to generate a lot of creative stuff, creative ideas, right? And it's very useful for us to look at it. So the second principle is taking out. You take out something, right? You take out parts of a particular action that causes negative effect. So if there's something that is negative in some way, you remove it out from the system, or you say that, okay, let me eliminate only that part. There is something good that is there, but there is something bad. So I just eliminate the bad part of it in some way. So, for example, many businesses do this of takeout. What they do is they outsource. So, if, say, for example, I am in the car manufacturing entity, I may outsource some part of my non-core business in a way. So, I may outsource my people management systems to a third party, issuance of managing the salaries and managing government policies, and ensuring the money goes in the right place for my employees. So I may outsource the non-core part of business, and many of the outsourcing businesses is all this, of removing entities above, right? Also, you will see that there is another example separating development and production activities. Sometimes you may take out certain activities, development or R&D is done by a third party, and then you just manufacturing on the production. I was looking at, for example, a lot of builders, in real estate, they would sell their flats in a certain way, but actually the building is built by a third party who is doing it. So you outsource. So their whole focus is on branding, on interacting with the customers, and money flows, and managing different vendors. But the main activity of building the structure itself is handed over to a third party. Distant learning is also a kind of taking out, because you take out your effort for moving in different directions. Giving customers purchase discretions. So you may have certain elements where you may, like for example, guarantee or warranty duration. You may give that decision making to the customer. So you take out some elements which is harmful to the system in some way. So, like for example, now let us use a takeout inventive principle to generate some ideas, some creative ideas. So if you look at this statement that we were trying to resolve, what if there is a potential to earn higher salaries and less time, and money is spent while pursuing a master's degree, right? So I am taking out. So I'm taking out something that is harmful. So what is harmful here is time and money spent, right? So how do I take out the time? How do I take out the harmful elements, because that was really harming me. So how do I accelerate time, and how do I reduce time in some way? How do I take out? So I may, in this case, have areas where I take out, like I was mentioning earlier, take out also matches this, that rather than doing a huge kind of a program, I take out the elements which are very interesting for me and which are valuable to me and business linked also. And that would really help me, right? Similarly, if I take out elements, I join programs or I join entities which offers master's programs, but is done for executive professionals through consultants who have real life experience, not theoretical experience. Then what I've done is I've taken out the theory part of it. I am now experimenting with only doing something. So I learn something in theory, come back and I'm experimenting it in my work environment and trying to operate and work higher. Now that helps you to go to the higher roles in large number of ways, right? So, for example, people management, you are in people management structure and you understand how do I manage conflicts with people, and then it's taught not only by people just theorists in a way, but people who have actually done that in their career, and you take that learning back and implement it. There's a higher probability that you would always go accelerated way, right? So you take out certain elements. You take out the money spent. So how can I get sponsorship? Can I take out the money by having my organization do something for it? Can somebody else sponsor this for me? So I'm taking out the money aspect and trying to reduce that impact in large number of ways. So you took out some elements from here. So you can actually try and solve a lot of business challenges in very creative manner by looking at these ideality elements, and taking using at least two principles. There are only two here, but there are so many others which really help you to work through a lot of these kind of challenges on a rigorous way. So being creative itself is something which is not a god-given gift. It can be easily taught, and of course, it's not that it's easy in the first go that you would operate, but you may want to experiment with it on a rigorous manner, and that should really help you to work with it in large number of ways, right? So I'll stop here. Any questions that you may have for today's session? I focused on how do we bring about creativity, and creativity which helps us to innovate very specifically from a business point of view, from a problem solving point of view, and using inventive thinkings, which typically uses some part of contradiction thinking, understanding how contradictions are framed, and how do we use those principles for us to change a perspective, because creativity cannot come without changing perspectives. So to look at how to change perspectives on how you look at things, and then framing what we looked at ideality is, when I say contradiction, there is a plus and minus going, and always every challenge has a plus and minus going together in a way. And um, so, and then looking at inventive principles for you to, and we saw two of them, segmentation and taking out, for us to trigger our thoughts in a certain direction on what else we could really do to address a particular challenge. And I think being creative in art and other areas that we spoke of is important, but expressing ourselves as professionals in the work that we do in a very creative manner is very, very fulfilling. And that itself is an art in some form, right? So any questions, any queries, questions that you may have? all open. I'm just browsing. Oh, Siddhi's question, very interesting question here. How do you strike a balance between staying true to your creative vision and being open to evolving ideas and perspectives, right? Right. So I think being true to your creative vision, uh, yeah, and this is exactly what many of the successful leaders do, is that they have a fair sense of the end state that they would want to attain. But and I was reading about Elon Musk. Not that I'm a great fan of him, but it's good to, like I mentioned. So Elon Musk has his own creative vision end state. He's driven by his own vision of what he sees of putting human being on the Mars and maybe populating the moon, the surface of the moon, and of course driving resources, electric vehicles and mobility and other space that he is really involved in. He has a vision, a creative vision, and is true to it. He follows it in a way. But he is also very, very cognizant of the fact that he interacts very closely with his team. There are incidents where he is in the manufacturing shop floor to ensure, how, what are the bottlenecks, what is really happening, what are different ideas people have, how do we build upon that, challenging them, discussing with them, looking at different perspectives. So it's a very gentle balance between your conviction to your own vision versus being open to other people's thoughts, perspectives. And I think enriching yourself with different thoughts, processes from people, different perspectives, and not letting go your own vision because that's unique to you in some form, right? But leveraging it and letting it influence you in some form is very critical for you to be very creative with people. Yeah? So it's a very interesting question. Any other questions that you may have? Let me just have a look one more. Yeah, Alicia is asking here, from your experience, what are some of the hidden gems in inventive thinking processes that people often miss but can be of real difference in boosting creativity? Right. So in inventive thinking, the most important aspect is, like, the earlier question was about your personal vision. In this case, in ideality thinking, the vision essentially morphoses in the ideality state, the ideal state. What if? What if? So you are formulating your vision as a statement, because you need to communicate your vision to people, other people. It's very important that you do that because you can't attain your vision alone. You need to have others buying into your vision. So it needs to be stated. So what if? So that ideality statement in inventive thinking is very critical, because what if talks about, I'm facing a challenge. There's a plus and a minus. There's, for essential, I can do an MBA, but it will cost me, it will help me grow, but it will cost some money and time and others. But what do I really do? What if I do something which gives me a degree, gives me growth and money, and is less expensive and is less? So you see, the and is coming in. So there are so many demands, there are so many ants coming in, and that pushes you towards creativity, because it was, I cannot have just a general solution to do an MBA. No, it can't work. What do I do different that helps me do it in the right way? And that what if framing is very, very, very critical, I would say, in inventive thinking, in all creativity also. Creative aspects is, how do I do that? In fact, for example, one act plays, is very famous one since some time back on Kabir and some of the other elements. One act, 2 hours non-stop, one person is acting in one go and capturing an audience of 400 people. You need to be super creative and have a vision with you, right? It's not that he is only alone on the stage, of course, yes, but he has a team right up front with him to support and do that. So then the what if is, what if I am able to do this alone and capture an audience and storytell and send a message to the audience in a certain way through the play, and that what becomes is creative. Okay, and that what if is a very critical entity for us to look at. Okay, thank you so much for joining for today's session. I hope you enjoyed the session, something new, something provocative, something to look at, and be continuously creative, because if you practice this on a regular basis, you will see it's like the muscles of your body. You become better, stronger, and more flexible in some way, and that would help you to be leading a very rich life professionally, individually, and solving a lot of challenges in very creative fashion. Yeah, enhancing your level of creativity. So thank you so much for joining in.